Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Interviewing in Today's World. This webinar is part of the Career Ready by Alumni series. And as you can see, we've partnered with Student and Graduate Employment. My name's Lindsay Diamond, and I'm an alumni coordinator at Mohawk College. I'm so glad everyone was able to join us today, and I look forward to learning alongside everyone. So I know we have lots of great material to cover today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Hussam. Hussam is an international career advisor at Mohawk College with over 13 years of experience in career advising in the career advising field. He is passionate about career coaching with a genuine interest in developing strategic plans to assist students and recent grads in achieving their career goals. Hussam, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Hussam Al-Deeb. I'm the International Student Career Advisor at Mohawk College. And what that means really is that I am part of a team that will help you find work, or at least prepare you to find work in your field. And that could be obviously for students while they're in school and individuals like yourself who are recent graduates. Now, what I'll do is I'll jump into the Prezi. Now, this Prezi is specific about interviewing and interviewing preparation. Now, keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of information today to cover. Our advice, or my advice, would be to have you book an appointment with us in the future. As alumni, you still have access to our services. So you can always book an appointment with us to do mock interviews and talk about any interviewing challenges or concerns that you might have. So right off the bat, I do want to introduce who we are. So we are Student and Graduate Employment. So every university, every college will have a career center. The career center at Mohawk College is called Student and Graduate Employment. That's who we are. And really our objective is to work with students and alumni to support the development of their employability skills, right? So that means having you sort of being very marketable without any barriers to employment. Right? A lot of barriers to employment can take place, including resume that isn't, efficient, lack of interviewing skills, lack of job searching skills, lack of employer research and skills. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way of you attaining a job that's in your field. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is the interviewing piece. So the individuals that you see on this slide are the career advisors and coaches. So there's three of us right now. It's myself, Sherry Wade, and Ruth. So you can certainly book an appointment with any of us, and we hope to help you through those appointments. Now, we are still available Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Even though we're not on campus, we're still offering the same service during the same times. Again, 8:30 to 4:30. Now, most of our appointments are Zoom. Some individuals, some students tend to go for phone, sometimes email appointments, whatever accommodates your schedule and your preference. So keep us in mind in case you are in need of an in-depth conversation about your career. In terms of what we do in those appointments with you, we can, talk about your resume, cover letter, e-portfolio if you need it, interviewing, networking strategies, job searching approaches, consultation. Now, consultation is an interesting piece because I don't want you to think of us as just resume writers or sort of a one-trick pony. We are career advisors. We will help you with anything career related, right? So it could be a scenario where you realize maybe you got to switch careers, or maybe maneuver your way into a slightly different field, or anything that really comes up that isn't on this list, we can cover in consultation. Okay. So in terms of booking an appointment with us, so I strongly encourage you to do it through careerready.mohawkcollege.ca. You can use your MyMohawk username and password to log on and just book an appointment. You'll see a calendar of all the appointments that are available, and you'll book an appointment through there. Or you can always email us at success@mohawkcollege.ca. There's a few extra steps with booking an appointment if you email, but we can still accommodate book an appointment for you through the email. Okay, so let's talk about interviewing. So as a career advisor, I am not a perfect interviewer, right? And neither of you are. And that's why we are here. we need to make sure that you understand what kind of mistakes you could potentially make and how to avoid them. I remember when I graduated university, I can tell you stories about, the terrible interviews that I conducted that I look back on and cringe, right? So our objective here today is to make sure that you don't do that and that you are really having important conversations with these employers and showcasing your skills in a marketable way. So the first thing we will do is talk about the types of interviews that you could potentially have. Phone and video conference, one-on-one and group panel, structured, unstructured, and testing interviews. Now, because of the pandemic, a lot of the interviews that have taken place in the past year, leading up until now, have been via a video platform, whether it's Zoom, Google Meets, and so on. So let's talk about the preparation for that and what to expect in those interviews. So the first thing that you have to make sure you understand is that distractions will get in the way, right? Whether it's getting in the way of the employer performing like they wanted to perform, or you performing as an interviewee. So close the door and windows in your room, silence your cell phone. Only window open on your computer screen should be the video platform you are using. I mean, these are tiny things, but they go a long way. So we want to make sure that you set yourself up for success when you are in a Zoom interview. So that's the first thing you want to do, is just eliminate distractions. If you have roommates, if you have pets, if you have kids, make sure that's all taken care of. Like I said, banish the pets and kids. You wouldn't bring your dog to an interview or a child, and the same thing goes for Zoom. Obviously, if you're currently working right now in a part-time job and it involves some sort of Zoom meetings, of course, kids will hop on, and that's okay just because it's part of work and people are understanding. But during interviews, that's a whole different matter because, for that half hour or hour interview, you need to be focused and you need to make sure that you're marketing yourself and representing yourself in a really professional way. Find a neutral background. So make sure that, when you are interviewing, you have a background that is not distracting, right? So it could be a picture or, a wall, a white wall, whatever the case may be, just as long as it's not distracting. You don't want to have a background like mine, where there's a lot of things going on. You see my table, you see the couch. I mean, that should be okay, but sometimes there's a bit of a mess in the background. So make sure that the background is always professional. Ideally, you would have sort of a blank wall or some sort of picture. Choose a small chair. And that's an interesting tip for you to consider, because the bigger the chair, the less professional you're going to sit. I think you just get comfy in a big chair and it just sometimes looks like you're slouching. When you sit on a smaller chair, you automatically just sit up. And that's important for you to do. So think about that. Think about how different chairs kind of help your posture. Master your lighting. Make sure you consider, where your computer is when you're interviewing, whether there's natural light coming in, whether you need to, bring in a lamp that's next to your computer, and just test it out with friends and family, just to make sure that your lighting is appropriate and professional. Test your gear. And that's really important, whether it's Wi-Fi connection, whether it's the actual platform that you're using. So if it's a platform that you haven't used before, like let's say Zoom or Google Meets or Microsoft One, make sure that you've tested it with friends and family, or even us with career advisors, just to make sure that you're comfortable using it. I don't think it'll look good if you're having a hard time navigating the platform while you're in the interview. Keep your eyes forward as much as you can. A lot of the times the screen of the individual you're talking to would be on the side. So you're kind of looking in a slightly, skewed direction. And that's okay to some degree, but ultimately what you want to do is you want to be talking to the camera as much as you can, just to kind of create that connection. In person, when you're talking to an employer, there's a sense of connection when you're, looking right at them. So it's a little bit more difficult virtually. So try your best to look at the camera as much as you can. Practice makes perfect. I can't tell you how important that is. So Again, I want to bring in your family and friends to make sure that you're practicing with them, not even to get feedback from them, but just to get comfortable talking about yourself. I think that for a lot of individuals, that is really a hard piece to kind of master, is to talk about yourself and what you can do. And ultimately, obviously, you want to connect with us. We can do mock interviews with you. We can talk about specific things that you need to work on and improve on. So practice is going to be essential for your success. Get in the mood to talk. For me, I remember when I was job searching, a long time ago and looking for work, and whenever I get interviews, for me, it was really important for me to be active right before the interview. I think it gets your energy up. It lowers your nervousness a little bit. You're not as nervous. And that is my sort of point of view about it. It could be a bit different for you, but try that out. Go for a walk before the interview, do some jumping jacks, just get your heart rate up, and see how that works for you. Because a lot of times that could help ease the nerves just a tiny bit. Make a cheat sheet. That's an important piece as well. And I'll talk about this a bit more in a bit, but you want to make sure that you fully understand the job posting when you're interviewing, right? And have some things that you want to talk about. It could be on post-it notes that you have on the screen that they can't see. It could be on a notepad next to you. And that's the benefit of interviewing virtually. Is that you can do these things. You can have those cheat sheets next to you, and make sure you have those in front of you in a way that isn't distracting, but it'll help you kind of remember certain things that you want to talk about. So that's just kind of a tiny sort of overview of how you want to navigate the Zoom interview and whatnot. Obviously, we can go in depth if we meet one-on-one in your case. So let's talk about the one-on-one versus group format. So a lot of the times you will get an interview where it's just you and another person. I've had those interviews and you will have those interviews as well. So it's usually face-to-face or via Zoom. So those one-on-ones, you want to make sure you understand who you're meeting with. So research them, find out who they are, and make sure that you are comfortable sort of marketing yourself to just one person, because a lot of times people are more comfortable marketing themselves to a group of people. It just seems less personal. It just seems like you are presenting as opposed to interviewing. So I think that's an interesting thing for you to consider as well, is just get comfortable talking to one individual about who you are. Panel interviews. Now, panel interviews, I would say, are becoming more and more common. I would say they are more common than one-on-one. So panel interviews are the same as individual face-to-face interviews, but with 2 or more interviewers in the room. I've had interviews in the past where there were 10 people in the room. So it depends on the employer and how they operate. A lot of times they'll have a representative from HR, somebody who you would be working with, your supervisor, different people from different departments, to make sure that they're making the right decision and it's not sort of a biased decision on why you were hired. The main advantage of the panel interview is that it precludes any personal biases that might creep into the assessment process. Each interviewer will pick up on different characteristics, and that's really important. And to be honest with you, if I had to choose between a one-on-one interview and a panel interview, I would always go for the panel, just because in case you don't connect with that individual that you're meeting with, there are other people that you could potentially connect with, and they can see something that others haven't seen. So a panel interview is really, to your benefit when it takes place. And then we have the group interviews. So the group interviews don't happen as often as the panel, but they do exist. I talk to students all the time, sometimes in the ECE program, for example, where a facility will, bring in maybe 5 to 7 candidates and they do a group interview. So a lot of the times they might ask the same question to all the people that are there, and then they have to answer them individually. Sometimes they'll just ask a different question for each individual. So it's really important to understand what that means and how to showcase your abilities when you are in a group. So that is something that you can obviously work on with your career advisor and kind of pinpoint exactly what things you need to improve on when you are in a group. So you have to showcase your abilities in a group. And how do you do that when there's so many other people talking about themselves as well? Sometimes there is an assessment that is part of a group interview. And in that case, there's really no preparation for that. It's usually an assessment that is based on your work and what you can do. So let's talk about structured and unstructured interviews. The majority of interviews that you will conduct are going to be structured, right? And what that means is that the interview itself includes questions that have been predetermined by the HR, manager, whomever from that company or organization. And it's the same set of questions for every candidate. They do not change the questions, right? So that's a structured interview where they're just kind of trying to get information and receive feedback based on the answers that you give them. So structured is it includes skills-based questions and behavioral-based questions, which I'll talk about in a second as well. Unstructured interviews are a bit different. Unstructured is more of a conversation. I've had those in the past, and there's pros and cons to it. A lot of unstructured interviews tend to be just a casual conversation, whether it's whether they invite you for a coffee or at their office. And it's just kind of getting to know you on a personal level to see if you would be a good fit. A lot of the times the employers will have a really good understanding of who you are via your resume. Maybe you were recommended. So really the point of the meeting would be just to kind of see if you would be a good fit with the team on a personal level. I'll tell you one story that I heard about a CEO in the States who used to do something really interesting with interviews. So this individual, the CEO, would invite candidates for an interview over lunch. So he would say, meet me at this restaurant at 1 p.m. and we'll conduct an interview. So what this individual will do is he would go to the restaurant and tell the manager there to mess up the order of the candidate. Okay, so to make sure that whatever the candidate orders, mess it up. Don't give him exactly what he wanted. Or she wanted. So the idea here is that the CEO or the hiring manager wanted to know how you behaved in that situation, right? Are you the type that would let it go? Sometimes I'm that type. Sometimes if it's not really a huge deal, like a huge sort of mess up, I would just let it go, right? Other people might not. Other people might make a fuss. They might say, I'm late for work, or this is my lunch hour, whatever the case may be. They might make a fuss about it and make a big deal. And others might be, right on in terms of how they handle it and have that balance, right? So, how would you react to that? Is the question. How would you react if they brought you the food that wasn't the correct order? Because if an employer realizes that, hey, you didn't say anything, what does that say about you at the workplace? That if you see a mistake or if you see something that didn't go your way or as you planned, would you let it go, right? Or would you unprofessionally communicate with somebody who had nothing to do with it? It was the cook or whomever, and sort of send your message that way, or would you do it in a professional way, in a positive way, I guess. So that is an interesting thing to think about, and the different kind of unstructured interviews that you could conduct in the future. And then lastly, the testing. So that happens a lot with engineers, where you come in and they have something that you have to fix, or you have to sort of, talk about, investigate, explore, and then talk about. Those testing interviews are not as common, but depending on your field, they do exist, right? So if you are given a testing interview, and they will let you know beforehand. It would be a good idea just to investigate a little bit about what that test is, so you can properly prepare and see if there's anything that we can help you with as career advisors as well. So those are the types of interviews that you're going to face, right? The phone, the platform, the phone or video conference, the one-on-one or group or panel. And those could be structured, unstructured, and then obviously you'll have the testing as well, depending on your field. Now, let's talk about what to do before the interview. Now that you have an understanding of what kinds of interviewing you might face, let's talk about the interviewing, how to prepare for it. So researching the employer, studying your resume, and studying the job posting. Those three major things are essential for you to conduct a proper interview. And let me go through them sort of a bit in depth. So researching the employer is pretty straightforward. You want to get on the company's website. You want to figure out exactly what their mission is, what their vision is, and really understand who they are as a company. Because a lot of the times they will ask you, why do you want to work for us? And it's one thing to say, well, because I feel like I'm a great fit with this position. I've developed certain skills to accommodate this, all the requirements that you're asking for. But it's great to add on that the fact that you really do believe in their vision and their mission, maybe their work with the community, something that you find about them that is interesting to you. That goes a long way with employers. So researching the employer is the first one. Second, study your resume. And what I mean by that is, how can you market yourself? How can you talk about yourself if you haven't really studied your own professional experience and education? So what you want to do is you want to take your resume and highlight every point on that resume. And I want you to write down what comes to mind. So for example, your most recent work experience. Yes, there are going to be bullet points describing that job, but how did you really feel about it, right? What challenges did you face? What conflicts did you have to navigate with other coworkers? What was the supervisor like? What successes did you have? What achievements? When did you go over and beyond in that job, right? Those are all things that are going to help you answer questions, because as much as you would like to think that you're going to prepare by, going through interview questions and practicing different interview questions, the likelihood of you getting those questions that you reviewed are very low. So the idea here is you want to prepare yourself by understanding who you are so you can give examples. So for example, if an employer says, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker and how you handled it, as a behavioral-based question. Well, you studied your resume, you kind of walk down memory lane with all your work history. So you might come up with a few scenarios on the spot, because if you didn't do that, it would be hard to come up with something like that. So it makes you a better improviser in the interview when you know yourself on a professional level. And the same thing goes for your education. As recent graduates, it's one thing to say that, hey, I'm a graduate from the business accounting program. Yeah, but what courses did you take? What skills did you develop? Right? And how are you going to apply those skills in this job? So one thing that you can do is you can go on your program homepage. Right? On the left side of your program homepage for business accounting, for example, you will see program of studies. Click on that and you will see a list of your courses. I want you to click on every course that you completed, and they will have a mini description of what the course was about and what the learning outcomes were. That is going to help you better understand your education and how to showcase that in the interview. Because a lot of you, that's your bread and butter. That's what you're basing your whole thing on. Your candidacy is your education. It is not your work experience. So as much as you would like to talk about your work experience, the education and the courses that you've taken are going to be directly related to that job. So I want you to be very familiar with your resume and with your education. And lastly, study the job posting. Can't tell you how important that is. And just a tip from me, when you apply to a job, make sure that you copy and paste it into a Word document and save it on your computer, because by the time you get that interview, that job posting is going to be gone. And a lot of times, if you're applying to 100 jobs a month, you're not even going to know what job this is, right? So save your job posting, and it's going to help you prepare for the interview. So I want you to highlight every qualification, every requirement that they're asking for in that job posting, and use the same method as the resume, strategy to study, which is highlighting every requirement and every qualification and writing something down that accommodates that, right? So whatever it is that they're asking for, how do I accommodate that? How can I apply my skills to complete that or to do that based on my education and my work experience? So if it's a technical qualification requirement, a lot of times you're going to have to go back to your education and see where you took a course where you develop skills to accommodate that. If it's a soft skill requirement, let's say they want you to be a great team player with multitasking abilities and leadership qualities. Well, you can look back at your work experience at Tim Hortons. I imagine you have a lot of multitasking, leadership. If you're in a management position, a lot of those soft skills are transferable. So you're going to have to make sure that that's all fresh in your mind before you go in the interview, right? So studying the job posting and understanding what they want from you as a professional is really, really crucial before you go in the interview. So those are the three things that you want to make sure you do before the interview. Next, the understanding the difference between skills-based questions and behavioral-based questions. I'll touch on it just a tiny bit. I'll talk about it in just in a moment. But skills-based questions are questions that are directly related to a specific skill. So for example, do you know how to use Excel? Right? So in this case, you would talk about your Excel experience, how long you've been using it, what level of expertise you think you have, and maybe a couple of projects that you worked on using Excel. Right? That's a skills-based question, pretty straightforward. Behavioral-based questions are a bit different. Behavioral-based questions are designed in a way to figure out how you behave in certain situations, right? So I'll use the same question that I asked earlier. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker and how you handled it. So the employer wants to know, how does this individual navigate conflict? How do they approach a problem, right? So that's going to be something where you have to structure your answer in a way that is appropriate. Okay, I'll mention it again quickly now, but I think there's more information on it in just a sec. But you want to structure it in 3 different parts. The first part is what happened, what did you do, and what was the outcome? Again, I'll repeat that. What happened, what did you do, and what was the outcome? Because a lot of times, individuals might be long storytellers, and you might know individuals who, friends or family who, if they want to tell you a story, it's a 20-minute story that could have been told in about 5 minutes, right? And that's just their personality. That's who they are, a lot of details. And then there are individuals who will tell a story in a minute where, you probably wanted more information. So when you structure your answer in 3 different parts, what happened, what did you do, and what was the outcome? No matter what personality you are, you will hit all the points that we need you to hit answering that question. So again, part of what you're going to do before the interview is conducting mock interviews with me, family members, other advisors and coaches. I think that's going to be really helpful. Get a good night's sleep. Can't tell you how important that is. I know it sounds trivial, but if it's early in the morning and you were up till 4 a.m., it's not going to be a good interview. Looking good and feeling good, you usually gain confidence when you feel good. And you feel good sometimes when you dress well, when it's all about your image and how you feel about yourself during that time. So make sure that whatever makes you feel more confident, do it in terms of dressing. Location of employer. So if you are going in person for the interview, make sure you understand exactly where the employer is, so you can travel without any hiccups. And understand exactly when you have to leave, right? I think that's going to be a big one too. You do not want to be late. for the interview. In fact, if your interview is at 9 o'clock and you get there at 9 o'clock, you're late. If you're on time, you are late. Do not be on time. Be there 10 minutes, 15 minutes before the actual interview. So I talked about a little bit about this, so I'm going to skip through a couple. So researching the employer, understanding the job posting. This is just an image of the job. So a lot of times when somebody says, what is the attire there, or dress attire, or dress code, sorry, they could say business or business casual, and you have no idea what that means. Like, what does that mean, business or business casual? This is as close as we can get in terms of identifying those terms. So if you're not 100% sure, hopefully this will help you kind of figure out what kind of clothing to wear in the interview. And your checklist, so interview checklist. This is also things that you have to understand before the interview. Say a tailored cover letter and resume that you submitted, bring it with you. Make sure you have your reference list as well. Portfolio, if applicable. Talking points for common questions. The SAR stories that we talked about, what happened, what did you do, and what was the outcome. Make sure you have prepared for that. Questions to ask the interviewer. I'll talk about that in just a bit. Date and time, arrive approximately 15 minutes before. Appropriate clean clothing, notepad and pen. That's really a good idea too. Don't be afraid to bring in a notepad and a pen to jot down some information. A lot of the times, when you're in an interview and you're asked a question, a storm of sort of ideas start popping into your head that you want to talk about. And that can get very disorganized really, really quickly. So you can jot down a couple of words that you want to sort of touch on in your answer. And a lot of the times the questions can be a bit long too. So maybe you could even write the question itself. And obviously the directions, parking, if you're taking public transportation, understand, your journey to the actual employer's office. Okay, so that is an overview of what you should be doing before. Again, just to summarize the main points: study the job posting, study your resume, and study the employer, or research the employer. Now, what do you do during? So during the interview, let's talk about common questions. A lot of questions could be asked about you that include, tell me about yourself. Why are you leaving your current position? How would you define success? Things of that nature. Those questions are designed to figure out who you are. And then there are questions to figure out what your experience was like. So what do you consider to be your greatest achievement? Tell me about a time when, what has been motivating to you in past positions. So those are questions geared towards your work experience. There are questions specifically about your skills. So how has your education prepared you for this position? So this is a perfect example of how preparation can really play a huge role in you succeeding in an interview. Let's say that question is asked. If you did not prepare by looking through your courses and really exploring different learning outcomes in each course, you're going to have a hard time answering that question. Because you were in school for a year, 2 years, 3 years. How are you supposed to answer that question when you've been in school for so long? It's hard to sort of pinpoint how my education has prepared me for this position. But when you've researched, when you've prepared yourself in a way where you've went through your courses, you'll have an idea of how to summarize that in a really efficient way. And then there are going to be questions about the company and the position itself. So what do you know about our company? Why did you decide to apply for this position? And so on and so forth. These are all questions that will be part of mock interviews that you conduct with career advisors and coaches. And we can talk about how certain things should be said and not said. So here are some examples. So tell me about yourself. Not every interviewer will ask you to tell me about yourself, but some employers do. And in that case, talk about your education, experience, and skills as they relate to the job. Leave out personal details. That's really important, right? You don't want to talk about your dog. You don't want to talk about children or family members or anything like that. You want to keep it to your professional experience. So again, you want to talk about your experience furthest back, moving up to the most recent. Then you want to talk about your education. And then you want to talk about certain skills that you feel accommodate the position. That is to tell me about yourself. So for example, here's an example. I'm a graduate of Mohawk College's business marketing program. In this program, I developed my ability to create marketing strategies according to client requests and budgeting requirements. I have 1 year experience as a marketing assistant where I focused on online marketing using social media, including Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just a tiny example of how you can, develop that answer. And there are more questions here that you can definitely explore once you receive this Prezi, like what is your weakness? Why should we hire you? What salary expectations? What are your salary expectations? I want to touch on the salary expectation just a tiny bit. So with salary expectations, you want to make sure that you are talking about your salary in a way that is not connected to your value, right? And what I mean by that is, if you're a new graduate with no work experience, it's going to be hard to say I'm worth, $30 an hour or $25 an hour when you lack that specific experience. So the best way to talk about salary expectations is to research. Find out what the average wage is in your field, right? And then when you find out the average, and usually the average is sort of a range, let's say between 20 and 25 or 25 and 30. So when you give that information to the employer and you say, well, after looking at the labor market information in Ontario and some different job search websites, I found that the average is between $20 and $25 an hour. And right now that would suit my expectations, but I'm very flexible, right? And you want to add that at the end. The reason why you're bringing research into this is because if you overdo it with your expectations, so let's say they are asking for, or they're hoping to pay $20 an hour, or let's say $25 an hour, and you say you're looking for 32, well, for them, even if you're a perfect candidate, for them, if they hire you, they think that you might leave because you are looking for 30 and up. And for them, it's not worth the time to train you to sort of, adapt you to the culture and all of that. So that could be a red flag for them. And if you lowball it, so if they're willing to give you 30 and you say, I'm looking for 20 or 22, then they really might rethink whether you're ready for the job or not, or whether you believe in your skills or not. Having that research comment in your answer, meaning that you've done your research, whether it turns out that it's way lower or way higher than what they were expecting, they're still going to understand that this is based on research. It's not going to be sort of a deal breaker for this individual. We'll definitely share with them what we were looking for in terms of payment. So here is a behavioral-based question where we can use the SARB method. Situation, action, result. What did you do? What was the outcome? Or sorry, what happened? What did you do? And what was the outcome? Can you give me an example of a situation in which you effectively use your time management skills? Now, as you all sit there, imagine you're in an interview and this question was just asked. Can you give me an example of a situation in which you effectively use your time management skills? Now, if you had studied your resume and really kind of jotted down everything you felt about all your work experiences, things will pop up in your mind in terms of when, there was, rush hour at a restaurant that you worked at, or, even in retail environment during Christmas or whatever the case may be, where you had to use your time management skills. Things will come to mind. But if you didn't do the preparation, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So here is an example of the situation, action, result, answer. And I'm not going to go through that just because you will have time to go through it, but it will give you an idea on how to answer those behavioral-based questions. So interview tips, do not use your phone while you wait in the waiting room. It just doesn't look professional. So look at your resume or, read something that isn't on your phone. Be prepared to handle illegal and inappropriate questions. I'll talk about that in just a sec. Be mindful of your body language. Don't be afraid to pause before answering. Ask to repeat the question. Ask for clarification. Make notes. Leave personal details out. Don't talk negatively about past employers. Show confidence instead of arrogance. Thank them for their time and really always showcase positive energy. These are some illegal questions that can be asked. Now, if illegal questions are asked, there's a few things you can do. You can answer it, which I don't recommend you do. You can refuse to answer it. You can inform them that it is illegal for them to ask that, or you can inquire as to why they're asking. Now, if you're being asked a legal question, that's a red flag right off the bat. I would suggest you kind of, ex-nay that employer, to be honest with you. Because if HR or whoever is hiring you does not understand that that is an illegal question, then your time there might be very problematic. So, but if you ever wonder about those things, you can always connect with us and talk about potential illegal questions and how you can navigate that. Here are some stats from careerbuilder.com that I just wanted to kind of go through really quickly to make sure you understand and what to avoid. So I can't believe 59% of candidates were actually talking while chewing gum, but that is real. 63%, dissing their previous job, so talking badly about their employer, appearing arrogant, 69% appearing disinterested, wearing the wrong attire, and answering a phone call, 71%. It's bizarre to me, but it's real. So what I want you to make sure you understand is that some of these things you might do without knowing. So for example, appearing arrogant. A lot of times when you're nervous, when some people are nervous, they might come off as arrogant, but really that's their way to kind of fight the nervousness, is to kind of close up a little bit and seem disinterested, right? So if that's you, you got to work on it, and you got to make sure that you eliminate that from your performance. Common nonverbal mistakes made during job interviews: fail to make eye contact, have little knowledge of the company, not smiling enough, have bad posture. I mean, look, if you don't want to smile, you don't have to smile. It's just, it's part of that positive energy that you're trying to showcase in the interview. Having bad posture, fidgeting too much, whether it's with your hair or, with your facial hair, whatever the case may be, that could be a problem that you have, that you might need to improve on and work on. Having a weak handshake, playing with your hair and touch their face, like I just mentioned, crossing their arms over their chest. And I'll tell you, I actually did that once in an interview back in the day when I graduated university. The whole interview, I was just sitting cross-armed the whole time. And looking back at it, it's just one of those things where nobody told me not to do that, right? Because when you cross your arms, it means you're closed off a little bit from the conversation, right? But when you have open arms, you're welcoming to the information and the conversation and the person you're talking to. And use too many hand gestures, right? So that's something that a lot of people tend to do as well. So in an interview, you want to make sure you hold on to that. Okay, so that's during, and I'm going to quickly go through the after. It's just a couple of bullet points, and then we'll take some questions. So after the interview, you want to make sure that you immediately make notes about the job, right? So if you are in person, you want to go to your car or on the bus or maybe a nearby Tim Hortons and just jot down everything that you're thinking of. Questions that were asked to you, things that you did well, things you didn't do well. Because if you wait a couple of days to do that, your mind plays tricks on you. And your mind might tell you that went amazing, or your mind might say that went terrible, when both were true, right? So the more accurate sort of feedback to yourself is right after. So make sure you look at that, or you do that once you finish the interview. Within 24 to 48 hours, send a thank you letter to the employer. I think that's always professional. And you can always even talk about a point that they mentioned that you were really interested in, just to showcase your listening skills. If you were not selected for a job or second interview, ask for feedback about your performance during the interview. It's only for the thick-skinned, I'll be honest with you. So if you're thick-skinned and you want to hear that feedback, regardless of how hurtful it can be, it's so important, because you're going to get better and better when you hear those things from employers, right? So ask for that feedback if you don't get the job, and see how you can improve on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share, and I'll have Lindsay jump in here.
Amazing. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Hussam.
Thank you, Lindsay.
All right, so we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. I know it's been a lot of information. I was even like jotting down some notes, so it was great content. So we'll get started with the questions that came in, and then if anyone else has any questions, please put them in the chat. So we have about 10 minutes that we can spend on questions here. So the first one that has come in, oh, I just lost it. When asked, why are you a great fit for this company? What are the companies expecting you to say, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so that question is common. So what you want to do is you want to pinpoint exactly what you know about the work culture of the company based on your research that you've done. Maybe the company's, like I said, mission and vision earlier in the presentation, and really focus on that, in addition to how your skills match the job posting. Okay, so when you look at the job posting and kind of highlight every point, you can have a full understanding of how you will accommodate those requirements. So pinpoint what you can do to help the team and what skills you have to actually accommodate the requirements. I think combining both, the employer and the job posting itself is going to be helpful. You don't want to just talk about one of them. You want to combine both. Your objective there is to basically tell them that, look, I'm not just looking for a job here. I think I'm a good candidate for this job, but I really like who you are as a company, as an organization. I like your mission. I like your vision. I like your charitable work, whatever it is that you feel interested about. And when they hear that, you're going to differentiate yourself from other applicants because they might not be doing the same.
Awesome. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So the next one would be, and you did answer this, but I do have a follow-up in the chat. So it's how to properly answer the question of what is your salary expectation? So you did go over that. So then someone sent another question that is a great follow-up. Mm-hmm. Which sources do you recommend that you use to search for salaries?
Yeah. So that is a good question. So one of the first sources for you to consider is the Ontario labor market. So if you Google Ontario labor market information, the first link that you'll see, you'll go in there and then you'll type in your job title, and then it'll give you a profile of your job title. That profile will include the average salary, right? And that profile will also include, where all the jobs are and all kinds of really good information in general. But in terms of the salary expectation, that is one of the sources. Second one is Job Bank. Jobbank.gc.ca will give you additional labor market information. Glassdoor, Indeed also has some interesting information about salary expectations or salaries, average salaries in general. So all those sources will kind of narrow it down to what you think the range is. And when you give that answer, it's going to be based on reliable sources, and that's all the employer needs to hear.
Perfect. So the next one is how to respond to, do you have any questions for us at the end of the interview? What are some good questions to ask the company?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I first started interviewing, graduating out of university, I used to say, no, I'm good. And it was, what a horrible thing to do, because when you do that, you're basically telling the employer that you have no interest in this conversation anymore. You're done, right? You don't have anything to add, or you're not intrigued by anything they said, which is problematic. Right? You do want to ask questions. Now, the number of questions depends on what's on your mind. I've been part of interviews here at the college where candidates ask like 7 to 8 questions, right? I've seen candidates where they ask 1, right? The idea here is, regardless of the questions that you're asking, the point of your question is what's more important than the actual question. Right? So there has to be meaning behind the answer that you receive. A lot of times people will ask, what does a regular day look like here, right? Or in this position, which I personally do not like, because whatever the answer is for that question, how does that help you make a decision? Right? So are they going to give you an answer where you say, oh, that sounds too boring, or that sounds too complicated for me, or whatever the case? It's not a positive answer that you're going to get, right? It's always going to be, structured, unstructured, and it's not going to give you any reliable information to make a decision. right? What you want to do is you want to ask a question that's going to showcase your strong interest in the position and give you valuable information once you get hired. So for example, a question that I really like is the following. Looking back at individuals who've had this position before, what separated the good employees from the great ones? And I'll repeat that. Looking back at individuals who've had this position before, what separated the good employees from the great ones? You're not saying the bad ones from the good ones. You don't want to put the interviewer in that spot. You're asking them, what is your impression of somebody who's excelling at this job? Right? One, you're telling the employer that I want to excel at this job. I want to know what you think is a great employee. And I want to make sure I meet that, right? Secondly, the information that you get is going to be so helpful when you get the job, because you're going to have a really good understanding of what the excelling part is, right? You'll do the job, right? They'll give you specific tasks and whatever it is that you have to do, and you'll complete them. But how do you actually excel in the first 3 months? Usually probationary period or whatever the case may be. So that's going to be an important thing to ask. In addition to that, it might be also beneficial to ask a question about something that came up in the interview, right? That implies that you're listening. That implies that you're intrigued by what they were talking about. And I think that goes a long way. So whether they mentioned a project they're working on or a new branch that's opening up, anything like that is going to be a good way to showcase your strong interest in the position as well. So 2 to 3 questions usually are more than enough. One maybe about the conversation and 1 or 2 prepared.
Perfect. Another one that just came in. How do you approach a question that you don't know the answer to?
That is the interviewing process. A lot of the times that is the issue. So the reason why that happens a lot of the times is that you could be a bit too nervous to clear your mind in terms of answering that question. A lot of times nerves get in the way and you just can't think of an answer. And then when you get home, as soon as you walk in the door, you know exactly the answer that you should have given, right? So potentially that could be an issue. And one of your main objectives here is to make sure you understand how to lower your nerves, whether it's through preparation, whether it's through getting your heart rate up or whatever works for you. But in my case, it's always been preparation. When you prepare, no matter what questions are asked, you will be prepared to give an answer that that represents you in a good way, right? So if they're asking a question that you have no clue how to answer, and it's not part of your preparation, maybe it's something technical or whatever, and you don't know how to answer it, I think it's way better to say that I am not super knowledgeable about this specific topic, but I am confident that I will be able to learn quickly on the job with that specific task, and I will, do a little bit of my own research in the upcoming days to learn more about this topic. It's way better than pretending to know what you're talking about and then going on for 5 minutes about something that you have no clue about, right? I think that's way more natural, and it's more effective to show a little bit of humility and say, look, I'm not 100% sure, but I will definitely research, and I'm a great learner, and sort of take that angle rather than pretend to know what you're talking about. But again, preparation is going to come in handy, because preparation is going to help you avoid, not being able to answer any questions.
Fantastic. That was great advice. Okay, so we're just about to get wrapped up here, but I just thought I'd ask, do you have like your top 3 tips that you would kind of give people for preparing for interviews?
Yeah. So, and I hate to sound repetitive, but I find it so important. It's helped me and students, and even the different organizations that I worked for with just professionals, job seekers. The best way to prepare is to fully understand the job posting, meaning knowing what it is that they're looking for in candidates, right? So for example, if an employer asks you, what is your major strength, right? What do you think is your big strength here? You could say anything and it would be fine, but if you had looked at the job posting, you could have probably saw a lot of different strength that they're looking for, right? Whether it's teamwork, maybe a technical skill that you have, leadership, whatever the case may be. And then you can kind of go back to that and introduce that into the conversation and say, that is my biggest strength, right? What you're actually looking for. So preparation, knowing the job posting, that is number one. Number two, knowing yourself. You can't answer those questions that you did not prepare for if you do not know yourself on a professional level, right? You have to investigate yourself, explore yourself through your resume, and write down everything you think of when you look at a work experience or education or courses, because even if it sounds trivial, it might come in handy to talk about in an interview. And finally, researching the employer. It's going to give you a better idea to understand the work culture and the kind of interview that you might end up conducting. So research the employer.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hussam.
No problem.
So that's everything for today's webinar. It's been fantastic. Like I said, I've been jotting down notes and it was amazing. Any questions that you might come up with afterwards, you can always email them into alumni or the success email. I will send a follow-up email to wrap everything up. And just a reminder, through alumni, we host many virtual events, whether they're webinars, workshops, trivia nights, lots of different events. Follow us online and stay connected with us. Also follow us on social media. So that's at Mohawk Alumni. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And like I said, you'll get a follow-up email with all of these resources and links embedded in it. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.